Greetings, family. Welcome to the African Exodus show. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. Thank you for joining me for this segment, Conspiracy to Erase a Nation. In this particular segment, I'm going to break down that the New Testament, as well as the Old Testament, but this segment will focus on the New Testament, absolutely unequivocally points to the fact that it took place not inside of Palestine, but in the true location of the kingdom of Yasharel. That was in East Africa and encompassed a number of kingdoms or a number of countries. As we know them today, those countries would be Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sudan, Djibouti. All of those countries were encompassed inside of the region where the true Israel or Yasharel was located. Now, in this video, we're going to go through a number of things that I discuss in the book. I want to just emphasize to you all, I see a lot of comments of people who are asking questions or kind of picking apart certain points that I make and saying, well, what about this and what about that? I encourage you, if you're truly interested in the research behind what I'm saying, to buy the book. And I only say that not just for, the book to get sold, but because, number one, it's hard for me and just redundant, frankly, to answer over and over again people who are bringing up issues that I do cover in the book. In addition, there is a short form of the book that I did post on my Telegram and also on Patreon. I just want to emphasize to you all, Telegram is very easy to download. I've had a number of people say that they're unsure about downloading a new app. I promise you, it's very easy to download. You just click the link that's in the description. It will take you right there. So with no further ado, let's get ready for this presentation. The New Testament passages, two passages that actually show that the New Testament does not reflect Palestine. So let's talk about Mark 5:1-21. Many of you, I'm very sure, are familiar with this story. This is when Yahusha cast out demons out of a man, and the demon spirits go into a pig. Now, it says in Mark 5:1-21, they came to the other side of the sea, into the region of Gerasenes. When he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tomb with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, not even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains and cutting himself with stones. Seeing Yahusha from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him, and shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do you have with me, Yahusha, son of the Most High Elohim? I implore you by Yahuwah, do not torment me." For he had already been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. Now there was a large herd of pigs feeding nearby on the mountain, and the demons begged him, saying, "Send us into the pigs, so that we may enter them." Yahusha gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirits entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep banks into the sea. About 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. When Yahusha had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed by the seashore. I'm going to show you a map of where Gerasenes is told to us is located, where it's supposed to be located in Palestine. Now, as you see in this map, this place is nowhere near a sea. It's also important to note that it says inside of scripture that Yahusha had went to another region. The word for region inside of Greek is Korah. And this word actually means a different country. Not only that, the word for sea is thalassa. Thalassa only means sea. It does not mean anything else. In fact, thalassa is actually embodied by a Greek goddess with a similar name. So that lets you know that the text unequivocally is pointing to a sea. Now, biblical scholars have recognized that this does not match the geography of Palestine. So in order to change the geography, as they have many times, they have attributed the word sea to the Jordan River. Now, we should understand any other time where the Jordan River is referenced inside of scripture, the word is used patamos. Patamos is the Greek word for rivers. including the Jordan River. So they are doing what they often do, changing the geography using different words whenever it is a compliment to what they're trying to say. But if we take the text that it's actually saying, what it's actually saying at face value, what we're getting is that Yahusha essentially crossed a sea to get to the region of Gerasenes, not cross the river. Now keep that in mind, and we're going to go to an article. So this is an article that I cite in the book Conspiracy to Erase a Nation. It is Mark, speaking about the Gospel of Mark. Failed geography, but great Bible student. This is by Neil Godfrey. He explains what is truly a discrepancy in the geography inside of the book of Mark. Now, this is essential. This is very essential for you to understand, because Mark, it is widely believed, is the first gospel to have ever been written, and my belief is Mark and probably Matthew were originally written inside of Hebrew. So Mark was the first book of the gospel to originally be written by most people's belief. And he is saying inside of this article that Mark jacked up the geography if you actually look at Palestine. This is an important part to emphasize. So let's go through here. Much has been said about Mark's poor knowledge of the geography of Palestine. A classic case is his bizarre itinerary for Yahusha leaving Tyre to go north and then southeast and then back east again to reach his final destination. On the map here, locate Tyre. Run your finger north to Sidon, then let it wander to the right downwards till it reaches the Decapolis, then zero up to the Lake of Galilee. That is the route that the Gospel of Mark says Yahusha took in order to get from Tyre to the Sea of Galilee. Yahusha's travel agent must have been offering a super bargain, or Mark had little real knowledge of the geography of the area. Again, this is significant because Mark is believed to be the first gospel written, one which many of the other gospels used as a direct reference whenever they were composing their gospels. So if Mark didn't know the geography, then how are we to know if anyone had the geography right? So the problem is that they have mislocated Tyre and Sidon, or misnamed it inside of the scripture. We know this because of the fact of this discrepancy, and because if you actually read the Old Testament, it will tell you a lot more about where Sidon is and where Tyre is. Okay, so listen to Genesis 49:13. It states, Zebulun will reside at the seashore, and he will be a harbor for ships, and his flank shall be towards Sidon. Isaiah 23:1-8 reads, of Tyre and Sidon, well, you ships of Tarshish, for Tyre is destroyed without house or harbor. It is reported to them from the land of Cyprus. Be silent, you inhabitants of the coastland, you merchants of Sidon. Your messengers crossed the sea and were on many waters. The grain of the Nile, the harvest of the river were her revenue, and she was the market of nations. Be ashamed, Sidon, for the sea speaks, the stronghold of the sea, saying, I have neither brought up young men nor raised virgins. When the report reaches Egypt, they will be in anguish over the report of Tyre. Pass over to Tarshish, well, you inhabitants of the coastland. Is this your jubilant city, whose origin is from antiquity? Whose feet used to bring her to colonize distant places? Who has planned this against Tyre, the bestower of crowns, whose merchants were princes, whose traders were the honored of the earth? You should get the point pretty clearly from scripture. Tyre and Sidon were both maritime cities, and we know that they were close to Zebulun. Zebulun, if you look at the descriptions, would have been, I believe, around Djibouti, modern day Djibouti. And I believe Tyre and Sidon would actually be inside of modern day Somaliland. Now, there is actually a confirmation of this, a really good one. And when I found it, I was very excited because there's so much in scripture that we don't appreciate because you have to take time to directly reference the geography. Ezekiel 27:3 states, and say to Tyre, who sits at the entrance to the sea, merchant of the peoples to many coastlands. Now Tyre sits at the entrance of the sea. I want you to look at this map right here. This is supposedly Tyre and Sidon, right? This is the one inside of Arabia. Do they sit at the entrance of the sea? No, there is no entrance of a sea when you look at where Tyre and Sidon are located. However, look over here. This is East Africa. This is Somaliland. If you look, does Somaliland sit at the entrance of the sea? Absolutely, it does. I gave two very strong possibilities of the cities of Tyre and Sidon inside of the book. One, I believe, could be Zelia and also Berbera. These were both really prominent maritime cities inside of the region. They traded with the nations, as the scripture says. They were basically very well known throughout the region, and many nations, even up to the Greeks, all of them were aware of Tyre and of Berbera and Zelia. Now, what this means, though, is that Yahusha did not travel across the Jordan River. Therefore, him going to Tyre and Sidon and then going to Djibouti and then crossing the Gulf of Aden actually does make geographical sense, unlike what we read or what we